Okay, so drawing crease patterns with triangular symmetries doesn't necessarily mean that we're just using triangle twists. In fact, you'll see over the course of this video that you can use every single one of these types of twists, so triangle, hexagon, rhombus, trapezoid, that you can find in the downloads that are linked in the description below. So starting off with the triangles, I'm going to pick a triangle from column A and a triangle from column B, and I'm going to arbitrarily say this is going to be right-handed closed front and left-handed closed back. So this is right and left-handed columns. Copy those, bring up another template file, which is the CP triangle, because so I have a choice here. Do I bring up CP triangle or CP triangle on square? But I'm doing it in CP triangle because there's going to be a loop of 6 twists in the center. And this one I'm going to need to rotate 60 degrees so that it lines up with the neighboring pleat. And I'm going to go ahead and make these a little bit shorter. And if I remember correctly, there's not going to be a length of pleats that I can do that will cause me to have a grid intersection in the center. So no matter what I do, I'm going to have a little bit of off-centeredness. But I'll duplicate this, rotate 120, copy it on, duplicate, rotate 120, actually select the right twists, copy it on. And the reason why I'm doing this duplication is so I can select everything and get it as centered as it can be. So the true center is where my mouse is, right there. You can see that it has the same relationship to each of these closed triangle twist corners. But we have this, it's in the center of a grid triangle instead of a grid intersection. So that is just kind of too bad. We can't fully center it on this template. That said, there are ways to fold your tessellation with this point in the actual center. But I don't actually need all of these twists for copying everywhere. I just need those first 2. So I'll get rid of the rest. Each of these 2 twists is in a position of 3-fold rotational symmetry, and that center point was also a position of 3-fold rotational symmetry. We have enough here to copy everything. So I'll group, duplicate, and I can make copies that form a line. I'm not going to go all the way out to the edge of the paper or edge of the template here because Inkscape sometimes gets a little bit heavy when we copy too much or have like 5 files that all have something big going on. And so you can see I can copy this over as many times as I like because I have those 2 positions of 3-fold rotational symmetry that are in twists, and then that 1 position that is outside of twists. So that's what's going on if you only have 2 triangle twists that you're placing on your tessellation. And we can go a little bit further. We can do an arrangement of triangle twists where instead of each triangle twist being a position of 3-fold rotational symmetry, we have a position of 3-fold rotational symmetry and then 3 that are not in positions of rotational symmetry, and then another cluster and 1 that is again. So this is going to look very similar, but we're going to do it slightly differently. And I'm going to choose to do it with these choices of twists so we can see exactly what the difference is with these two options. So I'm going to bring up a new template, and this one's only in the Advanced Twist Techniques course, which if you're watching live, it might not be linked yet, but it definitely will be by the time if you're watching it with the recording. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to grab a cluster like the clusters we've seen already. So this open triangle with 3 closed triangle neighbors, these happen to be spaced closer together because I like to bring that spacing in. And then I'm going to alternate that with the closed triangle on the back with 3 open triangles around it. Copy that and bring up a new template file. This one will also be the CP triangle on a hexagon. So lots of new files happening. So pasting those in, I'm going to bring them kind of close to the center, and I want to match them up. So I'm going to need to rotate one of them. And I'm also going to need to flip this one because these are both starting from right-handed center twists. So if I flip that, and that was mirror over the vertical, now it matches up, but I do want to change a little bit. So this one, since I flipped it, I also need to change the lengths of the mountain folds so that they'll match up with their corresponding pleats in the opposite handedness twists. And so if I do it at this spacing, we have a little bit of extra space there. I'm getting 4 spaces around the center, and that should be enough. So here we also have that third position of threefold rotational symmetry out in open space. So we've got 2 positions of threefold rotational symmetry that are enclosed inside of twists, and then 1 space that we don't have to worry about. Now I do still want to figure out where the center of this is. So I'll duplicate and copy over, duplicate, copy over, and I can either grab this one from down here to fill in up here or make another copy of both. And so I'll select all of those and move it so it's, and again, it's not going to be exactly centered because we can see if I have 2 grid lines coming from open triangle corners, the third one will not be. Likewise with the closed triangle corners, the third one is off by 1. So that's as close as I can get it with this this grid, this center, and I'll deselect a right-handed and a left-handed cluster, group that, and that is what I will duplicate everywhere to get my final form. And you can see this is creating that structure, and now we're just using 2 pleats coming out of each triangular block. So this really does generalize. There's many different ways to subdivide a triangular block. So this is effectively dividing a triangular block into 4 subtriangles. And I want to show you some other ways of dividing triangular blocks. You can, in this example, take this triangular block, and instead of dividing it into 4 triangles, you can have a rhombus and 2 triangles, and then mirror that everywhere. You could have a big triangle with triangle corners and a hexagon in the middle. You could take this further, and actually I do want to point out, while we're still on this one, you could split in the middle here and have 3 rhombus corners and then triangles in the center. You can have these triangle, triangle, and then 3 trapezoids around a triangle. You could, instead of that being triangle, triangle in the corner, you could have those be rhombuses. So now we've seen the triangle, hexagon, rhombus, trapezoid, all of these options. You can do like that first split with the rhombus and the 2 triangles. You could do it a different way. You could have a triangle and a trapezoid. You could have that on its own. You could then have the next triangle be a whole double depth triangle and have that triangle and trapezoid be just part of a bigger triangle. You can really go wild with this. So these subdivisions, and that one is something slightly different, which I'll come back to. You can have these massive, massive triangles. So that's the triangle block that I was talking about earlier with the 3 rhombuses and 3 triangles. And then you can match that to itself, or you can match it to the hexagon in the middle with the 3 triangle corners and make this a massive triangle block that's then mirroring to repeat. There's so many options. You can have even more triangles in the middle of, or sorry, more hexagons in the middle of your triangle, even more. There's no limit to what you can do with this technique. You can have like these triangles in the center, and then it comes out and it morphs into rhombuses and trapezoids. And what this particular one is doing is it's taking this equilateral triangle tiling and it's removing certain boundary lines. So there are certain lines removed, certain lines left in place. And these are boundaries between twists that are being added and removed. There's a lot of different variations that you can get with just this technique. And the benefit of doing things this way is that all of the lines go all the way through, which means that there's always a good stopping point, always a good tiling break when you're folding. But coming back to this one that we said we'd revisit, the different thing going on here is that there's no triangular subsection that's then mirroring everywhere. Here I actually have 3 distinct positions of threefold rotational symmetry. And the way that I separate these out in my mind is I've got this big triangle, the double depth plate triangle with the 3 trapezoids around it. So that's a hexagonal thing. It just so happens that 2 sides have 2 pleats you alternate sides that have 2 pleats and sides that have 1 pleat. So that's one block. And then around it, I have a cluster of 4 triangles and a single triangle. And what's going on here under the hood is that the center of the big triangle, the center of the single triangle, and the center of the cluster of 4 triangles form an equilateral triangle. And that is the requirement for triangular symmetry. We need 3 positions of threefold rotational symmetry that themselves form an equilateral triangle. So we saw alternating 2 triangles, we saw cluster 4 triangles. Let's take a look at actually the hexagons in positions of threefold rotational symmetry. So with these hexagons, you'll notice that half of the hexagons are right-handed, half of them are left-handed. I have a position of threefold rotational symmetry in the right-handed hexagon, the left-handed hexagon, and the center of a loop of 6 triangle twists. So this is a similar situation to the alternating triangles and alternating clusters of triangles. We just have these hexagons thrown into the mix that are connecting directly to each other. So coming back to our template, I'm going to arbitrarily choose closed hexagon on one side and closed triangle on the other. This will be a pretty clean formulation. I'll copy that, and notice I copied a right-handed hexagon and a left-handed triangle, and open up my CP triangle template. Get rid of those line styles, paste it in, and I'm going to connect these. And what I'm going to do is connect the triangle in 3 locations. So 3 alternate pleats coming out. And then what I'm going to do is select all, group, duplicate. I'm going to flip on the vertical because this is the next thing that's going to come in contact. And I'm going to need to elongate certain pleats, shorten others. I'm going to shorten these triangle mountains to start because they need to match up with the opposite-handedness. And then for the, I'll bring it back so it's touching, and I'm going to need to elongate 3 spaces on the mountain and 2 on the valley. So 2 on the valley and 3 on the mountain. And this is going to pair up everywhere now. And I'm going to duplicate those and copy them out so I can find the center. And here I'm going to grab that top one, bringing it down. And here I can see there is an exact center on a grid intersection. So I will select all of that and bring that center point to the center of my template file, and then deselect 2 and delete the rest so that I can copy and paste everywhere. So this is again showing up as 2 triangular clusters that are copying everywhere. And this particular pattern first showed up, with a little less spacing in Fujimoto's work. It's one that I rediscovered independently and then found out later that Fujimoto actually knew about this one, which is super cool. And then so all of those other subdivisions of triangles, you're going to build up a triangular block, find the mirror image. There's certain cases where you can do a alternating on the other side image of that triangular block, usually involving open hexagons and closed triangles on opposite sides, which gets you evenly spaced pleats in 2 directions. But what I want to do right now is build up something that is a little bit more unusual. So when I was thinking about what I was going to teach today, I figured out that you can put 3 trapezoids around a mixed depth hexagon. And so I haven't figured out exactly what I want in the other positions, but we can go and play with that right now. So what I'm going to bring up this time is my master toolbox, which again is available through Advanced Twist Techniques, which is currently on sale for $15, and the link will either be in the description already or will be there at the end of the video. And I'm going to grab my closed mixed depth hexagon twist on the back, or I should also say 3-fold rotationally symmetric on the back of the paper. This is something that I've not used in many tessellations because it requires everything around it to be pre-creased. It itself is on grid lines. But here I have the open forms of the mixed depth hexagons. And then this one is the closed form. So I'm grabbing that and also some trapezoid twists, which I have up here. And these are going to be left-handed trapezoids. So I'll copy that over to a new crease pattern template. This is also going to go on a hexagon, with the other option being a square. And I'm going to stick that mixed depth hexagon right in the middle. So the other reason why I don't usually use this hexagon is because it can't be centered on a grid intersection. This is something that comes up repeatedly with these triangle symmetry patterns. So what I'm going to do is rotate this guy 60 degrees so that its double depth pleat lines up with the other double depth pleats. And I'm going to need to make those shorter so it can sit right here. And the reason why I generally don't use this mixed depth closed hexagon twist is because if it's on its own, it will self-intersect. And so I'm going to take these, them in, these, move them in. I need to do that on all 3 sides of the hexagon. So what we're doing is we're using the spacing with the trapezoid to prevent self-intersection. So the way this flap is going to fold into here is it's going to go in one spacing corresponding to this mountain, and then it's going to cut across and it's going to hit that center point. So if it didn't have the trapezoid in right here, it would keep going, and then this one would keep going, and that one would keep going, and they would all be running into each other, seriously multiply covering that central triangle. But with the trapezoid, it moves perfectly out of the way, and I can copy over to all three locations. So now what I have is a situation where I have three pleats in one direction and then one pleat in the next, then three pleats and one and three and one, and back to the first pleats. So how can I resolve this kind of situation? Well, I need to have a cluster that acts like a triangle, that has three pleats that are alternating what handedness the twist is. So my options here are triangles around a hexagon or alternating rhombi and triangles. So let's see if I can find an option with the hexagon. So I'll bring up back to the standard twists here, and let's see what kind of twist we want in here. Kind of having an awareness that our trapezoid will be coming through here and through here. So we don't want anything super crowded. So let's see what a closed hexagon on the back is going to look like in there. So if I stick that in there, oh, and this is going to need to be left-handed, so I'm going to grab the left-handed version. Okay, so sticking that in there, that's looking a little bit crowded right there. I could move it further up, or I could do a different hexagon. So this is live designing on the fly. And that's going to be a little bit better. I'm spacing it out so that I can get a closed triangle in here that's not like having its corner right up against any of the other twists. Still pretty dense though. And that's not going to be a position of threefold rotational symmetry because that triangle isn't going to hook up to the next trapezoid. So let's ditch the hexagon plan and go for a rhombus triangle alternating cluster instead. So the rhombus is going to hook up to the first trapezoid. The triangle is going to hook up to the central twist, and we're going to have another rhombus out here. And I'm kind of guaranteed a position of threefold rotational symmetry in the center because I'm going to have an empty space in the center. And the way that the cluster of alternating rhombi and triangles is defined is you have some spacing on one side of the triangle and some spacing on the other side of the triangle to the rhombus. And as long as the orientations work out, you're good. So I'm going to grab a right-handed rhombus on the back and stick it here. And I'm even going to stick it one spacing closer because that's how I generally design things. I don't like to leave a lot of extra space. So I'll stick that there. And I can see I'm going to need a closed triangle on the front here. I'm going to need to move this pleat out of the way. So this will be a left-handed closed triangle on the front. Copy that over here. And I copied it not quite in the end location because I'm going to need to edit those pleats. I don't want to be accidentally editing the wrong ones. So that fits. And then I'm going to grab that and duplicate, and I'm going to rotate back the other direction 2 turns, and I need that to line up. And so it's lining up and there's some overlapping pleats, so I'm going to edit those. And then I'm going to duplicate, edit again, and I'm going to remember to also edit all of those rotational copies that have the same position. Okay, so from here we have our loop of rhombi and triangles, and we could choose to space things out a little bit more. As it stands, this triangle is going to get covered, at least in part, by this trapezoid. So I actually am going to shift things, and this is going to change some edits that we had. So notice I can just shift this up, and that is not a problem. So what I'm going to do to make this easier to edit is undo those edits I did on the trapezoid corners, and grab these, move it up, get rid of that trapezoid and replace it with another copy that does have that matching pleat, and then re-edit this guy and this guy. So now, okay, this is the tedious part of doing the designing when you're working on a crease pattern. And I also changed these there. So I'm going to grab that set of 6 twists and group it. I'm also going to group my original set of twists. And what I'm going to do from here is find where my third position of rotational symmetry is. So I'm going to find the center of this closed mixed depth hexagon twist. I'm going to find the center of this loop of alternating triangles and rhombi. And what I'm going to do is draw a line between them. So that line drawn between them, I'll make that bold. And then what I'm going to do is take that line, duplicate, rotate it 60 degrees. And that is going to tell me where the center of my next twist needs to be. So what this is saying is this pleat coming off of the trapezoid is the pleat that I need to put a triangle twist on that is going to be a new position of rotational symmetry. I can't just put any triangle twist. I need to follow those symmetry rules. And by the way, I can go ahead and show that this does complete an equilateral triangle. But I don't need that last line to see that the center of the twist is going to be just off of the valley fold, which means that I need a open triangle twist on the back. And I'm going to need to rotate that so it matches. And it's going to go spaced in there. So what I'm going to do first is edit my pleats. So that they match up. And that is exactly the center of this open triangle twist. I can now get rid of my guidelines and say this chunk of crease pattern is going to repeat everywhere. Don't believe me? Watch this. And in triangular symmetries, we don't need to worry about multiple orientations of things because everything just has one orientation. So I just duplicated that. I'm going to copy it over here, and I'm just going to make a ring around that central one because that's as much as we need to prove that it works. And this one's going to go here. So that is all we need to prove that this will repeat everywhere. So what I just did is I found a central cluster. I found another cluster that matches up with it. And then I used the centers of those two clusters to identify the location of the third position of threefold rotational symmetry so that I could fill that position with a triangle twist and then copy everywhere. This particular tessellation is going to need to be pre-creased because of this closed mixed depth hexagon twist. But it's going to be pretty straightforward other than that. And the way that I would do the pre-creasing is by actually folding each twist in turn. So there's so much to explore in the realm of these triangular twist and triangular symmetry tessellations, not just things that subdivide a triangle, but also things that act like triangles, even though they're in more hexagonal positions. And actually continuing on that theme, we can have some pretty crazy results by using things in positions of threefold rotational symmetry where you wouldn't necessarily expect them. So let me bring up some examples going into my personal database, which is also duplicated in Tessellation Garden. So in this hexagons and triangles sixfold tiling category, I have a whole folder of things that have a maximum of threefold rotational symmetry. And here, propeller weave is one of the easier ones to recognize. And what I've got going on here is a hybrid hexagon twist that is threefold rotationally symmetric. And I paired it with a closed triangle. And at the point that I was drawing this crease pattern, I didn't really have an awareness that I needed to draw those symmetry lines, I actually did this one straight from a grid that I was playing with. But now it's much easier to make these since it's explicit what things to use in what locations. So for example, then when I was designing another one, which is actually going to be in this folder. So there's also, I separate out the folder for the mixed depth twists. So this is a open hybrid, or sorry, an open mixed depth threefold hexagon twist. And I decided that I was going to do a weave structure with tube pleat spacing. And I placed this closed double depth triangle on the double depth pleat, and I needed to see what did I need to put on the single depth pleat. So I drew my equilateral triangle between these two centers and then rotated to find the other center. And that is what told me that I needed this triple open triangle on the single depth plate. So there's many good uses of these symmetry rules when you're designing. And there's a whole lot to explore. So the tilings that I was showing earlier, some of them I've developed patterns for, like the first few. I haven't done so much in this tiling, but I've done some closely related ones. But quite a few in this hexagons and triangles threefold, one each in these two. I think 2 in this one. I have 3 or 4 in this tiling. I haven't done any in these other tilings yet. So there's a pretty wide open field for if you want to be trying out some of these new patterns, new techniques. There's a lot of room to explore that hasn't been covered yet. Yes, it'll take a lot of grid, but when has anything good in life come for free? So that is what I have to say about triangle symmetries and drawing their crease patterns. And I hope you will go download the templates, attempt this for yourself, and also try and see what new things you can come up with. See if you can play with these blocks, find some new patterns, and then go and try and fold them. So happy folding, y'all, and I will see you in the next video.